Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. This slot was actually reserved for Christopher Watt's What Else Do We Know, episode 10 in the series, but I've decided to put something else in that's directly current. And what's directly current is the furore that's sort of going on about the Lifetime movie. The Lifetime movie is just over a week away, and everyone is getting very excited about it. Some people are getting very angry about it. Some people are getting very anxious about it. And so in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about it, mostly in terms of just, what can we expect, or what have we come to expect from Lifetime movies dealing with true crime historically? What do we know from previous Lifetime movies? And as someone who's written quite a few books, I've looked at these movies as part of research, and so I want to talk to you about that. Then there's also Christmas Star. The entire audiobook has now been loaded onto Patreon, all 10 chapters. That's all available on the $5 tiers, so go and check that out. There's also other pretty interesting content on Patreon, I think on the $1 tier, such as the 15-part series on the Atkinson transcripts. And then something else that someone asked me to do on Patreon is Thrive. What did it do to Chris Watts? What is the impact of Thrive? And so that's going to be a brand new discussion, all on Patreon. So visit patreon.com/TCRS. In terms of this channel, I will be back to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann after this episode. And then I'm also going to be doing something on Harley Dilly, the little boy that got trapped in the chimney. And I want to just talk about a few things that I haven't seen anyone talking about that just seem pretty obvious from a true crime perspective, certainly. And so before we get to today's episode, please subscribe to this channel, like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So the Lifetime movie, it's coming out on the 25th, which is tomorrow in a week's time, so next Saturday, not this Saturday, next Saturday. And what we're going to talk about really briefly today is, are the Rzuceks right that one shouldn't watch the Lifetime movie, that it's not accurate, that it's not depicting things correctly? And of course, I've expressed concerns about this before. Just looking at a couple of photos, I was also already a little bit worried about it. I've blogged about this already on Crime Rocket, just saying, are the details important? And for me, that's kind of just an obvious point that all the details are important in true crime. The devil is in the details. So one of the first things that I sort of pointed out is just that when you've got a photo of the Watts family, how hard is it just to kind of get the details in that photo right? And one person may say, well, just get it basically right. I'm a photographer, and I've done some recreating of crime scenes and so on. In one instance, I reprinted a door in color, measured out the aspects exactly, bought a door and to do this experiment. And the answer is, you really want to get it as precise as possible. Every detail you want to get as precise as possible. And so it's just certainly annoying from my perspective as a true crime writer when you can't get very simple details right, like hair color. Just very simple, obvious details. Then I also put kind of a rhetorical question up, just saying, which version do you believe? And I don't think a lot of people followed where I was really coming from. It's just kind of a reverse psychology thing. And what I was trying to get at is that the Lifetime movie is going to have some value, because anytime you do a recreation, you're going to be noticing what you agree with, and that is going to be dramatized, and that's going to lead your thinking into a particular area. And you're going to be looking at what you don't agree with. You're going to be looking at things and saying, no, I'm sure it's not like that. And you could be wrong. What you don't agree with could actually be true, and the things you agree with might not be. And so when you see images of the Watts family not looking very happy, and then you see images from Shanann's Facebook where they're thriving and it's really vivid, color, and they look very happy, but that's for Facebook, then you've got to ask yourself, which reality is reality? And that is where I think a movie like this is going to be quite interesting. You do have to ask the question, is when they took the cameras away, I'm talking about Shanann and Chris Watts, when they weren't in a Thrive spiel or a Facebook Live, what was going on? What did it feel like? And I always felt like that 30-minute video in the Watts home felt a lot like what things were like. That felt quite authentic. That sort of half-hour video, that felt pretty authentic. I don't want to say much more about it right now, just that made quite an impression on me, and I think on everybody. But if we go to the historical performance or lack of from Lifetime, there is JODI ARIAS, Dirty Little Secret. I remember when I watched that, just being quite upset and literally not being able to watch more than a couple of minutes at a time, just because it was so upsetting how bad it was. And I ended up writing, I think, 6 books, co-authored 6 books on JODI ARIAS, and I just was really pissed off by so much that was misleading or just downright not accurate. And so that was one aspect. It's such a long time since I've seen it, I can't really even remember, but I do remember being very, very disappointed by the lazy way that I thought the film was made. Then Who Killed John Bonet? That was kind of a mixed bag. There were some moments that were really well dramatized. There were some moments that surprised me. To be honest, when I wrote the book Christmas Star, I remembered that Burke Ramsey had gotten upset over someone drinking soda out of his can. I knew this, I just didn't know how I knew it, and I was trying to get the information. And when I Googled it, I couldn't find it anywhere. And I got really frustrated, and I just tried to do better searches, and I spent more and more time just trying to rack my brain where I found it. And ultimately, I found the information kind of in a Lifetime movie. I found this scene dramatized in a Lifetime movie, something that I couldn't find anywhere else. And it turned out this scene was had been mentioned in James Kolar's book on Foreign Faction, on the Ramseys. But I'm just saying there you can sort of get an idea of the value sometimes of these movies in depicting certain things. Some of the things they generally get right, even if they don't necessarily get the details right. For example, in that particular dramatization, the woman who's drinking the soda, I think, is a black woman, and I don't think, or an African American, I don't think that was the case in the actual scenario. And sometimes when they just get the general appearance of someone wrong, I find that a bit odd. And then there's Oscar Pistorius' Blade Runner Killer. This was a case where Lifetime literally took work that I'd written and used it without crediting me as the author. And I literally had to contact Lifetime. I got an admission from them that they had used my work and got into kind of a legal dispute. I'm not going to go into it here, but that left a pretty bitter taste in my mouth, because had they contacted me directly, they could have made a much better film, and they could have got the chronology right. And despite using my work, there was a lot that they didn't get right, not because they were not applying certain things correctly or misapplying certain things. And that was incredibly frustrating as well. So in terms of the Lifetime movie of Chris Watts, we haven't seen it yet, but what we have seen are depictions. But before we get to that, I just want to cover what the Rzuceks are saying here. And they're basically just saying the problem is that if people are wanting to watch in order to see an accurate depiction of their daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren's lives, they need to look elsewhere. Well, where? Where must they look to get an accurate depiction? That's a serious question. What currently exists where one is going to get an accurate depiction? And I think that's an important question to answer, is because everybody wants that. Everybody wants an accurate depiction of what happened in the story. I don't know if anyone can agree what the accurate depiction is, but that is what everybody wants. And so where must one go to get this accurate depiction? So it's been the mission of Crime Rocket all along, blogging about this, to try and look at everything from all possible angles and then ultimately gravitate towards the most likely depiction, scenario, explanation, based on bringing all the facts together. Not just the facts, it's also the psychologies, the family dynamics, the evidence, the interrogations, and the kind of nuances you get in terms of what the investigators seem to be thinking or letting on without necessarily saying it. And putting it all together with very astute analysis and kind of intelligence and experience with true crime. Where does that take you? And so on the one hand, they're right to say, we do need to see an accurate depiction, and we may not be seeing it in Lifetime, but then where are we going to see it? And there was the same criticism of Oscar Pistorius' Blade Runner Killer. South Africans moaned that why was an American company making the film? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the South African company didn't do it. So that's something one's got to address, is if you're not going to make a film and get it right and depict things properly, then someone else is. If you're not going to address faults and errors and make sure that facts are right, then someone else is going to take over that, right? And there are far more people who are lazy with that stuff and who are opportunists and who are whatever you want to call them. There are far fewer people who are willing to do the hard work and anchor their research in evidence and in, the discovery, just to be quite obvious about it. I mean, if you really want an accurate depiction, just go to the discovery. That's giving you a pretty accurate scenario. Of course, the discovery alone doesn't have any insight. There are interviews with Trent Bolt, and it's not really saying what they ultimately believe. It's just giving the raw data, and it is requiring someone to interpret the data. Who's going to do that? So the aspect that I kind of want to address just in this episode is the depiction that we see in a photograph of Chris Watts, where, the dramatized Chris Watts, where he appears to be attacking Shanann. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that it was a face-to-face assault. I don't believe that Shanann actually saw Chris Watts before he reached for her and attacked her. I don't think it happened where they're depicting it. I don't think it happened with her just, I don't know, she looks like she's just standing in a t-shirt, so I don't know whether she'd slept, or I don't think she made it to her bedroom. I don't think it was nearly that light. I think it was a lot darker. And I think she was actually holding a suitcase and handbag and phone when she was attacked. And that would have been the best time to do that, because her arms, which she would have used in self-defense, would have not been available just for that split second. And that would have given him that advantage. And if this is upsetting to you, well, then you shouldn't be in true crime. True crime is all about trying to figure out what happened, because we don't know what happened. If it's upsetting to you doing that, then you should stay away from true crime. You shouldn't be here. You should go and watch the Kardashians. And the other aspect that for me is kind of crazy is, and I say this with sympathy and compassion to the Rzuceks, is I think they've gotten very upset by this version, which Tammy Lee says, well, I believe it because it's worse than the previous version of the children being murdered at the well site. I think that is really traumatized the Rzuceks and upset them and hurt them. And the thing that's regrettable about that is I don't think it's even true. I don't think that happened. So I think their hurt and shock and pain in that respect is for nothing. It makes one wonder, did Chris Watts give that version to hurt them, or which I don't think he did, but it's possible, or did he give that version because that was the version he thought the authorities wanted? That was the version that the authorities sort of led Chris Watts down the garden path with. Because if you understand this case very well and you understand Chris Watts and you follow the interrogations, Chris Watts never sort of stands on the podium, is given a microphone like a YouTuber, and he just talks. And the version you get from him is his version. What you get instead is somebody saying things to him, and then him answering with a few words, and then someone saying things to him, and it's almost like leaving breadcrumbs, someone leaving breadcrumbs for him, which he then picks up. It's not Chris Watts taking you somewhere, it's the interrogator taking him somewhere. And that's the big error in this case, unfortunately. And so if we're going to get a Lifetime movie that is about Chris Watts's confession, I mean, the name of the Lifetime movie, the title of the Lifetime movie is Chris Watts Confessions of a Killer, right? Then what you're going to get in the movie is a dramatization of his confession, which isn't true. None of his confessions thus far are true. And the most dramatic, shocking, upsetting of his confessions is the second confession. And so that's probably the one they're going to go with, because that's got the most entertainment value in inverted commas. And that would be upsetting, especially since it's not true. I don't know how they're going to dramatize it, but they're going to be dramatizing something that I don't believe is true. But that wouldn't be the first time Lifetime has done that. And that's where I sort of say there is value in dramatizing a crime scene, because you can see that it's either accurate or not. And I've seen this done in a courtroom. In the Henry Van Breda axe murder thing, where he claimed that he fended off the axe murderer, like a phantom axe murderer, they actually dramatized this in court. They actually had him acted out in court, where someone held an axe in his hand and he held a knife, and they kind of wrestled in slow motion in court, and he had to say under oath what happened, and they had to do this sort of dance, and it really wasn't very convincing. And so in that not convincingness, you you get a sense of what reality probably is, and that does have some value. You had exactly the same thing in the Jason Roeder trial, where Roeder's claim was that his wife had hung herself on the hook of a bathroom door, and then they said, well, can you demonstrate this? Can you act it out in court? So they had the door, they had the hook, they had the curling iron, they had the wire, they had a person stand in for his wife, and it wasn't very convincing what he showed. So with all due respect to the family and their feelings, yes, it can be upsetting, but then don't watch it. But it does have some value from an analysis perspective, right? Where the legal team expressed that Shanann's parents are concerned about outside parties profiting off their tragic losses, the part that I want to address is things like just the media per se. I'm talking about just the ordinary media, the Denver Channel, the Denver Post, all the publications that just cover news. I can tell you now that true crime is an area that news gravitates to because it's so it catches the public's imagination to the extent that it does. And are you telling me that the media don't make more money when there's a high profile case? More people are interested. If you just think of the crowds clamoring in front of when the O.J. Simpson verdict was coming out, same with JODI ARIAS, same with Casey Anthony, all these cases, the media make a lot of money. The ordinary mainstream media, the people selling magazines are making a lot of money. And so that has been going on for years, and no one is saying that that's right, but it is simply the world that we live in. So to sort of be saying, we don't like someone profiting from, that is how, true crime is true crime. There wouldn't be so many documentaries on YouTube right now. There's another one on Netflix on Aaron Hernandez. They wouldn't be there if people weren't interested in them. And the fact that people are interested in them makes money for these production companies and these media companies. I've attended trial, and you see stacks of journalists, you see photographers clamoring. And as a narrator, I don't need to do any of that clamoring because I'm there for the long haul. I'm kind of gathering content, absorbing it for one book, but they're there to get a juicy story every single day. They sort of clamor to talk to the victim's family. They jostle around one another to get the day's photo, right? And all of that has a monetary value. It appears on the front page. If you get a good front page, the newspaper sells more advertisements. It's the way of the world. So I think my advice to the Rzuceks is, if they are really concerned about the story, about the image, about the truth, have someone tell their story. Tell their story. Don't try and interfere with a story from the side. Have someone tell their story. Put up your hand and say, we want to tell our story, and tell your story. Or approach someone who you think is reliable and honest, and someone who understands the how to tell a authentic story and tell your story. I don't think you're going to be as successful trying to shut down other stories and silence people. I think you're going to be more effective influencing the story by sharing your own, and by doing that in a powerful and compelling way, and in an honest way. So that's just my suggestion. Okay, and then that's it for today. I'm going to come back to the Oxygen series. Still haven't finished that. And then on Patreon, I'm going to be also looking at the impact of Thrive on this whole, on the whole situation with the Watts case. I do think it's an area that hasn't been thought about very much, discussed very much. It is a bit of a minefield, but it is something we will get into. It's my birthday this weekend, so I don't think I'm going to be as busy as I've been on YouTube as I have been. So if you don't see me for a little while, that's why. Okay, thank you for listening.